From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to Blue Sky, where we share stories and insights to remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. I'm your host, Bill Burke. One of the many joys of hosting this podcast is speaking with remarkable people I would never have met were I in a different line of work. A different but also fun opportunity has been the handful of occasions when I've interviewed a friend. My guest today is one of these. Scott Nash and I met about 30 years ago when he was doing design work for TBS Superstation and I was in charge of that cable network. Today, he's executive director of Illustration Institute, a nonprofit arts organization that promotes illustration and other narrative arts. He's also a creative director, graphic designer, illustrator himself, writer, and the owner of Nash Box. As an author or illustrator, he's published over 50 children's books, including Flat Stanley, Saturday Night at the Dinosaur Stomp, The Bugliest Bug, Tough Fluff, The Case of Ducky's Missing Brain, and The High Sky Adventures of Blue Jay the Pirate. Scott was also a founding partner of the firms Big Blue Dot and Corey McPherson Nash. He's an expert on branding and creative development of television properties with clients including Nickelodeon, PBS, ABC, and Comedy Central. Beyond TV, Scott has worked with American Girl, Disney, Harvard University, Mattel, Milton Bradley, the Boston Pops, and NPR's From the Top. Scott has lectured widely and taught at Boston University, Northeastern University, the Art Institute of Boston, and the Maine College of Art, where he helped establish the illustration department. He and his wife Nancy live on Peaks Island, Maine, where they co-founded Illustration Institute. I hope you enjoy this blue sky conversation with Scott Nash as much as I did. Scott Nash, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast.
Hey, it's good to be here, Bill. Good to see you.
Yes, it is a rare treat to have an old friend, a longtime friend, I should say, not an old friend on the show. There's so much I want to cover with you, but let's take the easy way out and talk about your childhood, because so much of your career has been built around creating work for kids. And I'm sensing there must be something about your childhood that sparked this, or you have a vivid memory of your childhood. Can you tell us about that and what's that connection to your current work?
So it's a good question, because a lot of what I'm about and what builds my optimism and development of what I do as an illustrator and an artist is connecting in a tangible way with people. And I mean one-on-one. I like getting together with people. And I think some of that was bred or was an outcome of the fact that I moved 9 times before I was in second grade. And for some kids, that would be traumatic. I don't know what it says about me, but I actually thrived on that. We were moving like every 6 months.
Were your family in the military or?
My dad actually, when he married my mother, was a repo man. He worked for Borg Warner, which is the large corporation. And he started out as repo man, but he had developed some skills in the Navy, which was organizing warehouses and that sort of thing. And that's what he was doing. So we moved, I was born in Chicago, and we moved, as I said, 9 times, before I was in second grade. And I actually, I think it made me who I am today, because I had to make new friends wherever we went. And my parents used to tell stories about, when we were in Indianapolis for 6 months. The first thing I did apparently was go and knock on the doors of the neighbors and introduce myself.
I love that.
And also asked if they had any cookies. It was a very different time, but everything was really, tangible, connected. And, I sort of, as an adult, at a certain phase of my life, sort of fell out of that, and now I feel like I'm back in that phase of being a kid, connecting with as many people as we possibly can. So it's something that I think is vitally important for everyone, but especially artists.
And eventually you went to the prestigious Cranbrook School in Michigan outside Detroit.
Yeah, that was a dream come true for me. It was that I did my undergraduate work at a school called the Swain School of Design, where I met my design professor. I was actually a painting major and and a graphic design major. My graphic design teacher was Tom Corey. Tom Corey was my professor, and Tom, for those of you that don't know, is a brilliant designer that both Bill and I had the good fortune of working with. He's not only was he an exquisite designer, but a masterful thinker. He was a very thoughtful man, and he was very much. I think it's fair to say he was very much in demand in the mid '80s and through the '90s for not only his design acumen, but also for his philosophical sort of approach to design. And I had the great good fortune of working with him in my undergraduate program, and he suggested that I go off to graduate school, and I chose a school. Swain School of Design was a very sort of pragmatic school. It sort of taught you the basics. It was perfect for me. It was learning, all different sorts of disciplines, everything from ceramics to woodworking to graphic design. And then Cranbrook is is one of the most experimental schools in the world. It prides itself at looking at the world differently, and it was founded by the Saarinen. Elio Saarinen did the St. Louis Arch, and then Charles and Ray Eames. You may not know those names, but Charles and Ray Eames are very well known for their furniture design. They're best known for their bent plywood recliner with its that is actually now it's an object. It's an art object basically. But what I loved about this school was that it was experimental and playful at the same time. There's a playfulness that is imbued in the work of, say, the Eames, but also in the faculty that were there. That was Catherine and Michael McCoy, June Kaneko, Daniel Liebeskind. There was high degree of experimentation, and in some cases a great degree of playfulness as well. The work that I did at Cranbrook bears no resemblance to what I do today, and I'm actually quite proud of that. So.
Well, it's interesting you use the word playful because I hadn't thought of that related to your work, but I think it could apply to so much of what you've done. And I'm glad you mentioned Tom Corey. He has since passed away. He was a fantastic human being. And when I met you, Scott, in the mid 90s, you were with Corey McPherson Nash. So that was Tom Corey. You were the Nash. And you had, by that point, if I have it right, you worked on the original Nickelodeon logo and brand identity, which was iconic at the time. Comedy Central, Nick at Night, Cartoon Network, which I think still has the exact same logo, TV Land. And then I met you. You were doing some incredible work for, again, kids work for TBS. What was it that drew you to that firm and to the early days of cable television in which we were both lucky to work?
Well, the firm, that's a very simple answer, is that Tom Corey called me on the last day of graduate school and said, "What are you doing now?"
I want a
And
job.
he suggested that he had a job for me, and I was delighted by that. And so I really moved from Michigan directly to Boston. As far as the our connection to cable and those early days of cable, I'm not being cheeky when I say that some of what I was discussing earlier about my childhood, having this predilection for going out and knocking on doors. We really did that in those days, and the doors that opened to us, we would head down to New York. The doors that opened to us was the cable industry. It was MTV, and I think partially the reason why we were so successful in that area is that nobody none of the conventional executives in entertainment were taking cable seriously. And so what you had is rogues like like you, like Fred Seibert, Alan Goodman, so many great people working in that industry and trying to change what they perceived as being the sort of the conventions of television. And so we would walk in. It was a dream for me to walk in at Nickelodeon and say, here's what we're going to do. We want to do not one logo, but we're going to assign Nickelodeon a color, orange, because it was the least liked, it was the most hated actually color from adults, and we're going to have the logo change all the time. And we were drawn to doing things that were had a handmade feel to them, that felt like they were kid-like, that we were a little bit allergic to early computer design. We wanted to do things in stop motion animation, live music, that sort of thing. It was I went from a master's program at Cranbrook, which is highly experimental, right into an industry that was also highly experimental. I really feel, and I know you feel this way as well, because I worked with you on a project called the disaster area, and I was looking at some of that stuff, and I just kind of want to say thanks again for letting us do that stuff in those days.
We actually
Because
paid you for
oh
that,
my,
didn't we?
yes, yes,
Wow.
yeah, it was a very highly creative time, and I think that I find myself to this day, I look for things that are wonderful that people aren't taking seriously. And there's all sorts of areas where I think there is opportunity. And these days I'm thinking a lot about self-publishing as opposed to working with publishers, because it does allow. I'm not against publishing, but I like what happens in the self-publishing world. So I'm very interested in that. And it's what got me into, what I'm doing with Illustration Institute, basically. Same sort of thing.
I mentioned the fun I have interviewing friends, and it's surprising to me how, in the role of show host, I always seem to find out new things about people I've known for a while. For example, I had no idea that Scott Nash had moved 9 times before second grade, and I love the image of him as a youngster, knocking on strangers' doors to introduce himself and ask for cookies. Scott's outgoing personality, curiosity, and playfulness were supported and developed during his education, and these qualities served him well in his early professional life when he did so much breakthrough work in the early days of cable. I don't know if I ever fit the description of a rogue, but I was lucky to be there at a time when being an underdog and trying to change the rules was a lot of fun. In my case, being led by a bona fide rogue and optimist, Ted Turner. Getting back to our conversation, we'll leave the TV world, the color orange and disaster areas, and jump over to one of my very favorite subjects, books. Before we get on to the Institute, let's talk about books. Because, a short bio of you will always include some of the incredible books you've illustrated, and probably, in terms of popularity, and the one that a huge chunk of our listeners will have heard of is Flat Stanley. Can you talk about not just that book, but the phenomenon that is Flat Stanley? Because at its height, it was something else. Can you just talk about how that all came about and why that was such a phenomenon?
Flat Stanley was written by Jeff Brown, just for those of you that don't know. And it's a story about a little boy named Stanley Lambchop. I always feel like I need to preface this by saying, "Welcome to my world. This is the stuff I really like." Who is Stanley Lambchop, who is flattened overnight. He's in bed and he's flattened overnight by the bulletin board that's next to his bed, which falls on him during the night. Mind you, he doesn't wake up during this incident, and he's flattened to an eighth of an inch thick.
Yes. It's a bit of a leap for readers, but the way you illustrated it made sense.
But what I love about the writing in that book is that when the parents discover, when his brother discovers that Stanley is flattened, the parents rush up to the room, and instead of saying, "Oh," they're not screeching or anything like that. They say, "Well, how do you feel, Stanley?" Stanley's sitting up in bed flat, and he says, "Well, I feel a little tingly." And the parents' response is, "Well, let's get you some breakfast, and then we'll go see the doctor." And that's the sort of writing that I love. And what happens with Stanley is that he learns the doctor can do nothing about his flatness. And so Stanley learns that there are advantages to being flat. He's able to fly like a kite, he's able to slip under doors. And what makes him a phenomenon is that he's able to fold himself up and mail himself places. And he packs flat food in the envelope with him. And this is a very oversized envelope. Who knows what it would cost these days? But what is truly remarkable about that book is not just the story, but as you said, the phenomenon. And the phenomenon is due to teachers realizing that there is an extraordinary teaching, not just moment, but a teaching opportunity in getting kids to either create a Flat Stanley and mail it places, or what I love even better is when the kids make a version of themselves. So it could be Flat Bill, Flat Ralph. And those are the ones that really mean something to me. And I'm just going to say, because I'm on this platform, at some point, what I would love to do when I have time is create actually a documentary, not about the book, but about the phenomenon, because Flat Stanley has had a major impact. And it's still popular. It rises in popularity with the cycles of parenthood. It depends on if you're the generation that read it. You're going to share Flat Stanley with your kids.
Yeah, so my first exposure to Flat Stanley, our kids didn't read it growing up. I think they were in one of those, they're maybe just a little bit too old. But one of their cousins, my nephew, we were living near you in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, right near a very iconic lighthouse, the Portland Headlight. And my nephew, Patrick, mailed a Flat Stanley to me, and we went. The idea was you get your picture taken in these various places, especially iconic places. So I stood there in the wind, holding Flat Stanley in front of this lighthouse, sent it back to him, and then I guess you'd go to class and put it up around the room. And it was this incredible way of teaching kids about different places in the world and how the mail works, and it was just a beautiful thing.
We just did a project here on Peaks Island where the students are working with an organization that creates a sailboat that's about 4 feet long that they launched from North Carolina, as it turns out. So it would pick up the Gulf Stream. And the idea is that it will sail to England, and the students have been tracking the boat. And the principal of the Peaks Island School approached me and said, "We want to come up with a creative project for this. Do you have anything in mind?" And I said, "Well, we could do a variation on Flat Stanley and have the kids at the school create a flat version of themselves that would go in the hold of the boat and travel. We're hoping to Ireland or England. It's now in Labrador." And it's apparently it has been moving, and they've been I believe they've been photographed in Labrador. I haven't seen the images yet, but the idea is wherever they land, they'll take the crew out and take a picture wherever they end up. So we're hoping they'll make it back into the stream and over to Ireland or England in the next few weeks.
So you've served as an illustrator for Flat Stanley, for at least one Dr. Seuss title that I'm aware of. You've also written your own books and illustrated your own books. Can you talk about those, and what's the difference between sort of illustration for hire, like a Flat Stanley, and coming up with your own story and developing your own characters?
Well, the honest answer is that I've enjoyed both very much. It's just I think an evolution, and I love work. I like collaborating in general. It's in my. I think that you're the same way. As a designer and art director, I love collaborating and will never stop doing that. I love working with authors. I like working with animators. I can't get enough of that. The working on a book that I've written and illustrated is is sort of an evolution in that it's allowing me to write longer form works. Like I'm wanting to do the works that I'm creating are generally not illustrated novels, not graphic novels, but illustrated novels. And just wanting to I mean, to be honest with you, Bill, I didn't grow up with a lot of children's books. The books that were read to me were as a kid um, were chapter books where the illustrations were sort of the reward or another dimension to added another dimension to the narrative. And so that's a form that I'm very fond of, and that's what I'm currently working on. I mean, my best known book for uh, from as an illustrated novel is The High Skies Adventures of Blue Jay the Pirate. But I've been also working on a number of other books that are, as I said, illustrated novels.
Yeah, no, and I would encourage people to check out Blue Jay the Pirate because in terms of the breadth of your style, your illustration style, Blue Jay the Pirate is so differently drawn than say a Flat Stanley, or it's way more detailed and realistic realistic if there's a bird with a pirate costume, but the bird himself looks incredibly much like a bird. You have a very wide range of skills. I'd be curious to know how many of you listening to this episode experienced Flat Stanley, the book or the phenomenon. I always enjoy hearing Scott talk about this work, and I know it's given him a lot of justified satisfaction over the years. And the character of Stanley Lambchop, dare I say, is a true optimist. Life threw this little guy a curve. He was flattened while he slept, but the calm support of his parents helped him go on to make the most of it. Of course, I'm kidding, but only a little. And this book is one of many examples of life lessons we can learn from children's literature. Now back to my conversation with Scott Nash and more on Illustration Institute. Illustration is something that you're very passionate about. You I believe, started the illustration courses at the Maine College of Art, Mecca. And you and your incredible wife, Nancy, have also co-founded the Illustration Institute. So can we talk about how do you define illustration? Because it seems to me it's a pretty broad term, and probably one of the very first forms of human storytelling was cave drawings and illustration. So help us understand how you see illustration and then how you got to the point of actually starting this incredible nonprofit that you have.
So that I have what I would call a working definition for illustration. It works for me. Won't work for everyone, and I don't think it's categorically correct. But what I say is that illustration is visual art that enhances a specific narrative. Narrative is vitally important to illustration, and in my mind, and story is vitally important to illustration. And so if your illustration is not a style, it's a means of telling a story, as you very astutely mentioned. Yeah, the cave paintings in Lascaux in France are depicting a specific narrative about a hunt. And so we at the Illustration Institute have embraced that working definition because it, it's convenient for us. And it also connects us to other things that we love, which is it expands the form beyond just illustration. It's also comics, graphic novels, animation. Uh, we've invited ceramic artists to the institute are bringing back narrative to pottery, which is very interesting to me. So it makes it all the more interesting for us. So that's the definition. The Illustration Institute was built out of my years and dedication towards academia. I've worked all throughout my professional career. I've worked teaching graphic design and illustration at a variety of universities and art schools. As you mentioned, I did establish the illustration department at Maine College of Art many years ago. It was in 2017, I think, somewhere around that time. And we actually created the way that we created that major was to pull together some of the best illustrators that live here in Maine, and we have an extraordinary amount of them to talk about, how could we develop a major in a reasonable fashion. That major has since gone to become Maine College of Art's largest major, along with animation, which I think is very exciting, and I'm very proud of that. But but back to Cranbrook, just for a moment, I've also had a love for what I call rogue schools or schools outside of academia, and I've studied them. The schools like the Black Mountain College, Cranbrook, Haystack here in Maine, offer and my new favorite, which is a school in White River Junction called the Center for Cartoon Studies, and they focus on very serious studies on cartoons and graphic novels and such. And that form, some of those forms historically, places like Black Mountain College, especially, I think you could argue, and Cranbrook to some degree, have really changed, have had a more significant impact on the cultural landscape than many of the academic institutions because they were doing something that was experimental, exciting, um, and outside of the norm, which seems to be a theme for me. And so, sparked by that and the success of the Illustration Institute, I'm sorry, the program at Mecca, um, we established. I sort of stumbled into an idea, which was to create a school called the Illustration Institute, and the reason I say I stumbled into it, I just started talking about this. I would talk about this with anyone who would listen and express both my joy for illustration. I've always loved illustration as an art director and such. Um, and we talk about optimism. Illustration, art and illustration and storytelling has always fueled my optimism for the world in the darkest times. These are the things that keep us going. And so in 2016, I gave a talk here on Peaks Island at a place called the Trefetheren Evergreen Improvement Association. I call it a yacht club, but I get chastised for doing that. But it was founded to improve the community, basically. And I gave a talk there. I was asked to give a talk on my background and my work. I was a little reticent to do that because everyone on Peaks pretty much knows what I do. And at the last minute, I gave a talk called "Changing It Up," where I talked about ideas that I had. And one of the ideas was for this concept of a quasi school called the Illustration Institute, um, along with other ideas. And afterwards, people from the community stepped up and said, "We love this idea. Can we support this? How can we help you?" And that's how we took off, basically. We're now 8 years into it, and the Institute's mission is to increase appreciation and awareness for the art and work of illustration. But at the core of it, it provides. I mean, the real reason for being is that it provides me and Nancy and the other illustrators with great joy to take something, again, a topic that I mentioned earlier, something that isn't taken seriously, or isn't, or it's sort of invisible. Illustration is kind of invisible. It's interesting. It's popular form that's sort of invisible, and make it do audacious exhibitions of the work, create workshops and classes around illustration, and also offer an artist residency.
Amazing. And And with that work too, you've featured a broad range of present day illustrators, past things. The books I think about. My Blue Jay was Stuart Little, and I can still picture those illustrate. I mean, they were like right in front of my face, and Stuart Little in the car and on the sailboat, and I mean, it's just. So you've featured work like that, and then more contemporary, different stuff. New Yorker, cartoonist, a huge range.
You and I share the same love. You just mentioned Stuart Little. Stuart Little is illustrated. We know who wrote Stuart Little, E.B. White. And if you haven't read Stuart Little in your adult life, I'm saying this to the world, please read it again because there's depth to that book that goes beyond children's books. And it's what I would aspire to. I think all of us should aspire to. But the illustrations were done by Garth Williams. And we did an exhibition in I'm thinking it was 2018, perhaps 2019, which was at the Curtis Memorial Library. It was a show of all of Garth Williams' work, including originals from Stuart Little.
Did he do the guy who made the donuts?
Yes, Homer Price.
Homer Price.
You and I.
Oh, Homer Price. I could taste the donuts. Homer Price had this donut maker.
I hate to tell you, but we had originals of Homer Price there as well. And his earlier iteration, which was a character named Lentil. I think Homer Price became Lentil became Homer Price. But we had originals of the donut machine there. And what's fantastic, but to your point here, it's an art form that we all know, right? We know those works. We know vividly, we know the donut machine in Homer Price, right? And that image of Stuart Little and his the shipwreck, right? When people see this work, when we provide the work, the way that we present it is not with a frame around it. We float the work so you can see all the marginalia and sketching. People's reaction. We did this intuitively. What happens when people see these works? They get very emotional. They have an emotional tie to seeing the work. But they're also are poring over the work. There's a rational side to it as well. And so what we're hoping to do with these exhibits is there is critical rigor in illustration, and what we're trying to do is convey that to the world. So we also did, as you know, a Robert McCluskey exhibit. And we attracted 80,000 people to the Curtis Memorial Library in Brunswick. We had representatives from there were 22 countries represented in that show, in the audience for that show. And it just goes to show or to prove out this idea that illustration is very well loved, and it's just been somehow it's been invisible. Like, we know the names of the authors, we don't know the names of the illustrators, and we're fixing to change that.
Scott Nash referenced Peaks Island a few times here and how the people who live there tend to know each other's business. For those of you not familiar with this place, it's a small island off the coast of Portland, Maine, with a year-round population of just under 1,000 people. Not only are Scott and his wife Nancy two of these, they have also placed Illustration Institute there with the support of their community. It's fun to reminisce about kids' books, and it's amazing how much we can remember. E.B. White might be my favorite writer, and while I came to love his essays later in life, my first exposure to him was Stuart Little and Charlotte's Web. Scott also mentioned Robert McCluskey, and while you might not be able to place the name, there's a better chance you remember his books. In addition to Homer Price, he wrote and illustrated Make Way for Ducklings and Blueberries for Sal. These works have been bright spots in many kids' childhoods, and I agree with Scott Nash's sentiment that art and storytelling can help keep us going, even in the darkest of times. Now back to the final segment of my Blue Sky conversation with Scott Nash. Scott, you've been at this quite a while, uh, and around kids for a long time. As a teacher, as someone going into schools, telling stories, reading from your books. An awful lot has changed in the world since you first started doing this, specifically in the fields we're talking about. So you've had the onset of social media and the internet. You've now, I'm sure people are listening to this wondering, well, what's AI going to do for the illustration world? I'd love to hear your thoughts on what has changed and then maybe what hasn't changed with kids in the time since you've started working with them and producing art for them.
Well, these things happen in cycles, and as an optimist, I hope for these cycles to change. There was a period after, I was talking about in the mid 80s into the early 90s that were highly creative, where we all prided ourselves in creating works not in cable and also in children's media that felt handmade and real. We wanted real voices. We didn't want things that were sampled. We wanted to hear the real stuff. And then we went through a phase, and I've learned to live through these cycles where it went, in my opinion, sort of corporate and bad. Suddenly everything sounded the same. All the illustrations started to feel the same. Now, and I'm very critical of AI, but what I do, the bright side of this, I think, is that I'm seeing a lot of books that are that it seems to have sparked another trend, which is runs counter to AI, which is handmade, and language that has a handmade feel to it, that doesn't feel overly produced. And what I'm hoping, I think that we do have an ear and eye for works that are overly produced or badly produced. And I think, I've been, people send me articles all the time about AI and talk about how we're able to spot them as artists, for sure, spot an AI work and an AI piece of writing, but so is the public, and I think that if we're able to tell the world that what you really want is a form of human interaction, not only in meeting people face to face, but in the media, the works that we're reading, the works the stories that we're being told. You want that human face. And we'll go through cycles again where things will be horrid. But right now I am seeing signs of any number of children's media that seems to be moving away from what was pre-AI, actually, very conventional and very consistent in their look. And it is confounding to me, and I'm sure it is for you as well, having come out of disaster area and Nickelodeon, where the ethos was it's buy-in for kids.
Fascinating. Yeah, and I think you've hit on something I'm hopeful about, which is in a funny way, AI almost puts a premium on authenticity, on uniquely human creative spark, like you said, where it sort of raises the bar to say, okay, I can't just put out something that's very vanilla because AI can do that in a heartbeat. I've got to put out something that is very unique, that is very different, that's very human. And like you said, I think people can see it. When one of the more inspiring conversations I've had about AI was with Sal Khan, who created Khan Academy, and he's written a fantastic book called Brave New Words, and he's building AI for education. And he said, I came at this very skeptically because you think about cheating on tests and that sort of thing. But they've taken it and they're doing things where you can talk to Jay Gatsby through AI. Jay Gatsby, why do you look at the green light? Well, old sport, I look at the green, and all of a sudden, or talk to Thomas Jefferson. You said all men were created equal, but you own slaves, and have this really interesting dialogue. But the other thing he talks about is, because teachers feel threatened too, understandably, that this AI is going to work me out of a job. And he says just the opposite, that AI for teachers should be doing the drudgery, the grading, the lesson planning, and elevate teachers to do the only things that humans can do, which is that bring out the spark in a kid, see a kid who's struggling, and those sorts of things. So I'm wondering how that sounds to you.
Yeah, far be it from me to disagree with Mr. Khan, but I will disagree with him in that I think that some of that, some of what he's talking about is sort of a best case scenario. And unfortunately, we are very driven by business, very driven by uh, making things as cheaply as possible. And I think that will lead us, the onus is on us in the future to make sure that the quality of the work is at a high standard. And I'm afraid that what we're seeing is a lot of low quality stuff right now. And if the Khan Academy is watching over this and making sure that the content is working properly and the AI isn't hallucinating or suggesting bad things to kids, which it does now have a reputation for doing, as you know. I won't bring up the incidents, but I think that there's a tendency to be maybe too optimistic about this and not look at what the ramifications are. I think we've released a very important technology and potent technology in AI, but we haven't really determined what the ethics and the rules are. Basically, I didn't want to say rules. Actually, it's more the ethics of what we're doing with AI. We don't want to hurt. We don't want to hurt people.
We don't want to hurt people, and we don't also just want to leave it in the hands of the creators, right? It's almost like there's a democratic action that needs to happen, that people need to be paying attention and speak up and not let this happen to us. I think some things in social media crept up on us because we just kind of mindlessly, in many ways, just went on these platforms, started clicking and liking and supporting, and all of a sudden they were these behemoths that were manipulating what we see and what we think, and we should be on watch for that with this next technology.
Yeah, and I hope that the public will make their voices heard as to how AI is used and help to develop the ethics around that. It shouldn't just be lorded over by the people at Meta, people at OpenAI. It should be, we need the people's voices in this as well, and saying this is great, and this will not stand. It's like that's what we need to get at, and unfortunately, there's been some bad behavior on the part of the high tech companies that have been coming down on any criticism of AI. And I find that very disturbing, especially Meta has been doing, coming down hard on the voices that are criticizing AI. And now I'll probably be in trouble for it for just saying that. But it's something we need to be aware of, and we need to hear the public's voice in this complicated issue, basically.
Completely agree. So, what is Scott Nash working on these days? What's next for the Illustration Institute? Are you working on a new book? What's the latest in your world?
I am. Well, let me start with what's happening with the Institute. Very excited to say that we're really moving towards creating exhibitions that can travel around the country, primarily to libraries. Libraries are core because we can help libraries dimensionalize their relationship with their communities. And so we have an exhibit called The Great State of Illustration in Maine, which is traveling to its fourth location, obviously in Maine. But we're also developing. We have an exhibit that's titled Illustrosaurus, which is it's illustrated dinosaurs, and it's both from paleontology archives, which are fascinating drawings because paleontologists, use the drawings and artwork, sculptures of dinosaurs to get into a dialogue as to what would work. What are the physics of, the famous one is that T-Rex was for many years sort of depicted as standing up when it was more likely his head was down, their head, the creature's head was down. And they use sculptures and drawings to debate what a dinosaur looks like. So the work from the archives has some really outlandish depictions of dinosaurs. we're also including in Illustrasaurus artworks that are purely fanciful, like from Dinotopia, James, and from Danny the Dinosaur by Sid Hoff, and Sandra Boynton, and we're looking at a number of different artists. This will be a no pun intended, but this will be a big show, and we're planning to travel that around the country.
Dinotopia, James Gurney.
Oh, you are good. Yeah.
Now, here's why I know that. Dinotopia was one of the few books published by Turner Publishing when Ted started a small publishing arm.
I forgot that.
You remember? And I was working in that era. The guy named Michael Reagan ran Turner Publishing, and he saw these drawings from James Gurney. They turned it into a book. I think it was eventually a movie, they tried to make a movie. Jim Gurney, nice man too. I met him once.
He's agreed to have his work represented in the show. So just so you know, we generally will be premiering all of our shows in Maine, and then traveling them out. So that's one I'm excited about. We also have an exhibit that's titled "Connected by Story: Illustration, Maine, and the World." And what we're doing on that one is connecting. Maine has a reach that's beyond just, I don't like to think of it as a provincial culture. We actually pull people in increasingly from around the world. And so we're developing an exhibit that I hope will travel around that theme. We have a traveling exhibition on sports called Sports Illustrators, which is based on Leroy Neiman's in that show, and some contemporary Alison Bechdel's in the show. Very, very proud of that show, and hoping to travel it around the country. So
Scott, where is it? illustrationinstitute.org?
Thank you very much. Yes, that is it. Yeah, and our website is chock full of information about our exhibits, our exhibitions, our traveling exhibitions, and also our programming as well.
Well, Scott, I'm proud to call you a friend of about 30 years, believe it or not.
I love that so much.
Yes, we were wee toddlers when we first met, and it's a real pleasure to have you on this show and to tell the world about you. And I look forward to folks joining on illustrationinstitute.org, and I'm going to see you in Maine before you know it. So thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
I look forward to that. Thank you, Bill.
I appreciate Scott's direct and honest take on artificial intelligence. I agree with him that in all artistic pursuits, we need to be sure we continue to seek out genuine human input and human interaction. And he makes a point worth underscoring when he says that AI is an important and potent set of technologies, and we have a lot of work to do to sort out and establish ethical frameworks now, as these new products and tools are being developed and continue to roll out. Regarding Illustration Institute, how cool does that Illustrasaurus exhibit sound? Just as when we were talking about the works of E.B. White and Robert McCloskey, I can also remember how when I was a kid, we all experienced phases of fascination with dinosaurs. And it's fun to hear the excitement in Scott's voice when he describes what they're putting together here. That kid who used to knock on the door of new neighbors still has a childlike enthusiasm and optimism all these years later. I hope you enjoyed this Blue Sky conversation with Scott Nash. Before you go, please consider leaving us a rating or review. And consider subscribing to this podcast and following the Optimism Institute on social media. All of our Blue Sky episodes are made possible by the incredible editing and mixing done by the team at Sound On, Sound Off. You can learn more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. And all graphic design and cover art for Blue Sky and the Optimism Institute are provided by Crush Graphics. That's Crush with a K, if you'd like to check out more of their fantastic work at crushgraphics.com. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke. and I thank you for listening.